DawgNation. My name is Brandon Adams. We are live in Los Angeles, getting ready for the Rose Bowl, and Christmas is over. The holiday cobwebs, time to shake them off, and time to focus in on exactly what the Georgia Bulldogs are going to do against the Oklahoma Sooners, and punching a ticket to possibly play for the national championship. It is going to be a fun week for us here in LA, heading towards Pasadena. Wherever you are, whether you're making plans to make the trip yourself or not, we'll do our part to get you ready for it all as DawgNation Daily starts right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
And Happy New Year, DawgNation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is a very special edition of DawgNation Daily as we come to you live to start the week from Los Angeles, California, getting ready to make our way to Pasadena for the Rose Bowl on January the 1st. And what an exciting time this is, and almost like a dream come true in so many ways for so many of us who follow this program for such a long time, and so much fun watching the Georgia players get a chance to go through all of this over the course of last night as they arrived here in Los Angeles and everything that's set to come for the rest of the week. We're going to be covering it all for you here on our program each and every day from here. We're glad to have you with us, whether you're listening to us on the radio, watching us on Facebook Live, of course, the podcast version of the show. We're going to bring it all to you. Slightly different format this week because of the fact that we are here on the road and kind of things are moving fast. A lot of elements will be adding in as the things go on. It's almost like the calm before the storm for a lot of that here this week as sort of everybody kind of arrived into town yesterday. So bear with us if you're used to a certain format for DawgNation Daily. We may deviate from that just slightly, but we're still going to have a lot of fun talking about the Georgia Bulldogs. And, you know, one of the things that we were talking about, you know, before the show started today was, you know, kind of how cool it was to see the Georgia Bulldogs arrive last night in Los Angeles. They have this gigantic plane. And, you know, the thing that you really want, if you're a Georgia fan, or if you're just a college football fan in general, and you think about a team like this that gets a chance to own an opportunity to come to a great prestigious bowl like this, you hope the idea that the team gets to enjoy that, to appreciate just how special it all is and how great it all is. And when you see the footage, and I know the official Georgia Twitter account kind of tweeted some of this out of the players, you know, on the big 747. It's almost like one of those, like luxury type deals. They've all got their own space, seats that reclined all the way back. They were all relaxing and having a good time, and it is such a great commercial for Georgia football, such a great advertisement for what this program has done in year 2 under Kirby Smart and what it hopes to do for many more years to come in the future. And that's in a lot of ways what this Rose Bowl, I think, is for Georgia. It's obviously a reward for this current team for what it's been able to do, a signal for just how much success they've been able to enjoy, but maybe the foundation for future success as well. And I think it's interesting that you already see here in even these early days of this week leading towards this game, you already see examples of Georgia doing just that, of Georgia using its opportunity to be here to let the college football world know that this is a program that's arrived on the scene. This is a program that's going to be a force to be reckoned with for many years to come, and future generations of recruits are already kind of taking notice on this. I thought it was really interesting what Tommy Bush had tweeted out. He shows a picture. Tommy Bush, of course, the big-time receiver that Georgia's still chasing down for its 2018 class, that big, tall receiver that can maybe fit the role of what Javon Wims is kind of fit for this Georgia program. And Bush tweets out a picture that he got from Georgia. It says, "Greetings from Pasadena," and Bush has got the old Christmas sweater that's been superimposed into his body. "Merry Christmas, Georgia football," from the college football playoff. And, you know, that's Georgia kind of already using this spot in the Rose Bowl to recruit, already using this spot in Pasadena to sort of broadcast to the entire world of, hey, Georgia football is a big deal now. Georgia football is on the national scene, and if you want to play in big games like this, if you want to ride in fancy 747s and be a part of the biggest stage that the sport can provide, Georgia's the place that you want to come and do that. And obviously, Georgia's kind of already working on that kind of stuff from a recruiting standpoint. It's really kind of an interesting thing to see, and I think it speaks, frankly, to what people have already noticed in the first couple of years under Kirby Smart here. This is the kind of guy that's going to leverage every opportunity to his advantage. He's going to use everything that he can to make Georgia football bigger and better. I know that Andy Staples had kind of written about that a little bit at SI.com, that of all the sort of former Saban assistants who found their way into the head coaching ranks, there's probably no one that embodies the true sort of Saban process, embodies the things that have made Nick Saban in Alabama, such a college football machine. Probably no one has been better at constructing that than what Kirby Smart has been at Georgia. Jim McElwain tried that at Florida, didn't really work out. Jimbo Fisher, the former Saban assistant, had some of that going on at Florida State. It kind of fizzles out there at the end, and frankly, he was probably welcomed out the door when it was all said and done when he took the Texas A&M job. But what Kirby Smart's building at Georgia, and this Rose Bowl that the Dogs are about to play in this week, sort of has a way of symbolizing that. It has a feeling of just being a lot more permanent, of being a lot more formidable, frankly. And it's the recruiting messages to guys like Tommy Bush. It's maximizing the fun of arriving in Pasadena on the big 747 plane. It's all of that kind of just sort of symbolizes just how big Georgia football has become under Kirby Smart here, and how exciting Georgia fans are about what the future is going to be for this program. So it's going to be a great week for us here on DawgNation Daily as we talk a lot about all of this. And, one of the things that we're going to do here on our program this week is also mixing in a lot more of your comments. So many of you have such, I think, unique perspectives on what it means for Georgia in the Rose Bowl because, some of you are young. Maybe you can't think back to 1980, but you certainly appreciate how long it had been since Georgia won the SEC championship, which was accomplished back in December. Others of you have been around long enough to say, boy, I remember 1980, and I've been waiting for a moment like this for a long time, and I'm hopeful that Georgia can kind of go out there and close the deal. Wherever your perspective is on all this, we're going to do a lot of talking to you about a lot of this here on DawgNation Daily here today. In fact, let me dive in and get a few of the comments that are coming into our program already as we kind of interact back and forth here on a very special edition of DawgNation Daily Live from Los Angeles. And by the way, doesn't the downtown LA skyline look great in the backdrop here? Ryan Wilbanks in the comment section says that he's going to be Pasadena bound on Saturday and ready to party. And, it is kind of cool to see. We've already seen some Georgia fans here. You got to remember, we're still pretty early into the week. The game itself is still obviously, about a week or so away. It's going to be, next Monday. So we're still a good bit away from the game. So we haven't seen a ton of the Georgia fans yet. Have seen some of them here and there. I saw some in their hotel lobby last night. So you're starting to see some of that. But you get the impression here from all the corners of the globe, a lot of Georgia fans are well on their way to being here. Diane Gilkey-Dawkins says, "Go Dogs, beat the Sooners, you can do it." Yeah, I think a lot of Georgia fans are starting to feel that. And I think there's starting to be that growing sense of confidence. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. Jennifer Wheat Rucker says the dog machine is heading down the track. Jerry Lewis says, "How's the weather out there?" And I think that's actually a pretty interesting question, and that's one of those things that we are going to be watching a lot more here throughout the week. So obviously yesterday it was about 70 degrees, very warm, very nice. I left Atlanta where it was cold and came here, and it was a very warm winter day in LA, as you might come to expect. I have seen some long-range forecasts though that are talking about the possibility of about a 50% chance of rain for the Rose Bowl. I guess January in California here, the rainy season somewhat. Now remember, Southern California is still very much a sort of a desert climate, doesn't get a lot of rain, period. But I guess the time of year when it does rain is this sort of early winter time. So for now, there's about a 50% chance of rain for the Rose Bowl. We'll see if that holds out. I know that some Georgia fans would say that a potential rainy conditions for that game would favor Georgia, obviously, with its dominant running game. And there's also several tens upon tens of thousands of Georgia fans who have been looking forward to this contest, looking forward to seeing that beautiful backdrop with the San Gabriel Mountains, and they're hoping to enjoy that on a sunny day and not get much rain. So we'll kind of figure out on some of that kind of stuff. And by the way, Aaron Stevens also talking about the possibility that rain could be impacting what goes on here. That's certainly something we'll be keeping our eye on. Deepak Khanna asked, will Todd Gurley and Charlie Trippi be in attendance? I haven't heard about their specific plans here, but obviously Charlie Trippi, the great former #1 overall pick for the Georgia Bulldogs, who was a part of Georgia's last trip to the Rose Bowl in the 1942 season, and Todd Gurley, who's right now starring for the LA Rams, and no doubt proud to see the Georgia Bulldogs, his old college team, here in his current NFL town. No doubt he's going to be enjoying all of that. Alan Verbanchik says Fromm's going to have a field day against Oklahoma's 107th ranked pass defense. And, listen, this is one of those things that we're going to talk about, I think, a lot in the upcoming week. And the one thing that I have said here, a lot here on DawgNation Daily, is that if you are an Oklahoma fan, you probably don't realize the Georgia offense is better than you think it is. You know, the stereotype that exists for this game, and this stereotype exists for a reason, is that this is a all-time great Oklahoma offense, which it probably is, against an all-time great Georgia defense, which it probably is. That's sort of the bold print headline. If you don't know very much about this game, you at least know that. You know that these two units are dominant, and these two units have a great contrast in styles and a great matchup against each other. But sort of buried below the surface on that is that a Georgia offense is probably better than some Oklahoma fans realize. And I would suggest that the Oklahoma defense, and over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've tried to make my case as to why this is true. But in actuality, the Oklahoma defense is probably a little bit better than some people realize as well. And the thing we pointed to here on DawgNation Daily is this is one of those deals where the sort of old school traditional stats that the sort of, mainstream media kind of pump out there, total passing yards, total rushing yards, total points scored, this probably doesn't tell the full story for Oklahoma, because it does play in the Big 12 in a league where, they just choose to play at a much faster pace than in the SEC, where it's more about running the football and domination along the lines of scrimmage. The Big 12 is a little different in that regard, so you are going to give up more points from time to time. You are going to give up more passing yards. But when you look at the overall success rate for Oklahoma, you see something that's a little bit more in line with the national average. When you look at the overall sort of efficiency metrics for Oklahoma, what you see is, some people say, hey, they're pretty good against the run, they're awful against the pass, but they're playing against a lot of teams that pass a lot more than they run, and Oklahoma's also well ahead in many of these games, and so that has a way of sort of padding the passing numbers for your opponents as well. The overall story, though, is much like the Georgia offense is probably better than some Oklahoma fans give it credit for. I do believe that the Georgia defense is probably, or I should say the Oklahoma defense, is probably also a little bit better than some Georgia fans have maybe given it credit for, and that the overall storyline of this game of, hey, can the great Georgia defense stop the great Oklahoma offense, and that's sort of all that's going on in this game. In actuality, the actual real storyline is a little bit more, a little deeper, a little more entailed than all of that. And, of course, we're going to talk about that a lot here today on DawgNation Daily. So let me welcome you to the program. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And we are really happy to have you with us, no matter how you are accessing us today. If you're watching us on video, of course, we're excited to have the downtown LA skyline and our backdrop here. We're excited about making our way throughout all of California today, covering everything that's going on with this game and with this event. We'll tell you a lot more about that. If you're listening to us in podcast form today, we certainly appreciate you being with us. A little bit different podcast format than you're used to because of the sort of on-the-fly necessity of being here on the road. But we appreciate you listening to DawgNation Daily in podcast form, whether it's iTunes, SoundCloud, whatever else. Of course, I'll also post the show here at the world-famous DawgNation.com. And it's great to be back on the radio today as well. For the first time for us in a few days on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rep. But it is really, really fun to be on the radio with all of that. Speaking of the Oklahoma game, one of the things that we've been doing in preparation for the Rose Bowl is taking a look at how the game planning is going for the Georgia Bulldogs. We call that our Simply Smarter game planning, brought to you by Aldi, the home of Simply Smarter shopping. And by the way, this holiday season is a time for you to discover sweet deals at Aldi. All your favorites to make holiday treats this season, Simply Smarter shopping at your local Aldi. And let's dive into that with our Aldi Simply Smarter game planning here. And I was looking at some numbers, and I wanted to sort of address what I think could be a sneaky advantage for Georgia in one area that's maybe not getting enough attention right now. Bill Conley is the great college football writer for FootballStudyHall.com, and one of the things that Bill does are these like really in-depth statistical profiles where he just gives you every piece of data you could ever want about every college football team. And when you play a big game like Oklahoma and you have a lot of time to get ready for it, one of the things that I like to do is look and see how these two teams sort of match up side by side and a lot of this sort of rich data. And I found something that kind of jumped out at me in terms of one of the things that Bill Conley, who's a great football statistician, says is one of the crucial elements in determining who's going to win a game. It's how teams finish drives. And, a lot of times we talk about the red zone as being from the 20-yard into the end zone. That's what we sort of think of as the red zone. But Bill Conley says that when it comes from a statistical standpoint, it's more helpful of thinking the red zone is actually being a little wider. It's not just what you do when you get inside the 20, but it's what you do when you get inside your opponent's 40. From the 40 into the end zone, that's sort of the scoring section on the field. And how do you how do you take care of your business once you get inside there? And Conley actually had some pretty interesting numbers here. Obviously, when Georgia gets inside the 40, it's done very well this season, as you might imagine. It's averaging 5.26 points per possession for trips inside the 40. That's good enough for 7th best in the country. Georgia's defense also good at keeping teams out of the end zone or out of the scoring when they get inside the 40. Georgia allowing just 3.91 points per trip inside the 40. It's 26th best in the country, so very good there. You're probably not surprised to hear that the Oklahoma offense, very good when it gets inside the 40. It's 5.20 points per trip inside the 40. That's good enough for 9th best in the country. But here's where things get interesting. Oklahoma has actually been one of the worst teams in the country in terms of sort of bowing its back and bending without breaking when other teams get inside the 40. Oklahoma's actually allowing 4.64 points per trip inside the 40 to its opponents this season. That's just 88th best in the country. So that's a lot of numbers. What all those numbers mean? It means this, that Georgia's offense has been good at scoring inside the 40. Oklahoma's offense has been good at scoring. But Georgia's defense has been much better at keeping other teams out of the end zone and out of the off the scoreboard than Oklahoma has been when it gets into that part of the field. So that's a potential advantage for Georgia to enjoy in the Rose Bowl against an Oklahoma defense that's not been as good at keeping teams out of the scoreboard and the scoring area than the Georgia Bulldogs have been. Keep that in mind. It's Simply Smarter Game Planning. It's brought to you by Aldi, the supermarket that's the home of Simply Smarter shopping. All right, now here on DawgNation Daily, want to dive in and take a few more of your comments as we kind of take a look at everything that's going on with Georgia in the Rose Bowl. A chance for you to sound off and reflect on everything that you're seeing going on here. We'll enjoy giving you a chance to kind of weigh in on everything that you see going on here. Luigi Slim checking in from Jacksonville, Florida. Luigi, I know the folks down there. It's a great Bulldog club down in Jacksonville. Of course, the folks near Amelia Island and the Georgia coast as well, not too far from Jacksonville. I know they're excited about the Rose Bowl. Many making plans to head this way to California over the course of the next few days. We appreciate you checking in on the program. Luigi also brings up McCole Hardman. This is another example of something that I'd love to see Georgia get involved with in this game is find a way to get McCole Hardman one of those great special teams opportunities. You know, so many Georgia fans have said really the same thing over the last few weeks, that it seems like this guy has been so close to breaking so much so often, right? That every single time he touches the football, it seems like he's an eyelash away from taking the big kickback, from making the big return. And he's obviously one of the most dynamic weapons that Georgia has at its disposal. It seems like Georgia may be close, or he may be close himself, to breaking a big kick here for Georgia. We look forward to seeing that come down. By the way, speaking of Amelia Island, Justin and Michelle McGee checking in from Fernandina Beach. Good to have them with us. Mike Mazzell says, BA, we've got this one, pal. And what Mike says there is also kind of reflective of something that I start to see growing here a little bit as we get close to the game. And I talked to, I don't know if you had a chance to hear Monday's episode of DawgNation Daily. It would have been episode number 606, I guess, of the program. But I brought on John Shin, and John is a great reporter who covers the Oklahoma Sooners. Some of y'all had said, hey, we want a little bit more information about Oklahoma. We want to kind of find out some of the things that we may not already know about the Sooners. And John was a great guy to get that from. He works for our sister site, which is diehards.com. He covers Oklahoma for Diehards. And one of the things that I talked to John about was the way that, and I've mentioned this here before on DawgNation Daily, the way that fans talk about this game in comparison to the way the coaches and players from both these teams have talked about the game. You know, for the players, for the coaches, a month of buildup can be a long time, and it's pretty clear from the Oklahoma side that they are not trying to say anything that's going to get Georgia fired up. Bob Stoops from time to time would question the SEC. Bob Stoops from time to time would sort of tout the Big 12 in comparison to the SEC. But Oklahoma's being very careful not to say any of that kind of stuff. Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield's kind of gone out of his way to praise Georgia. We joked with Chip Towers about that last Monday on the program that there's no bulletin board material coming whatsoever from the Sooners. And Georgia's kind of the same way on that every single game. I mean, the Georgia responses from coaches and players fairly robotic, even when they do feel something, when they think something privately, like heading into the Auburn game. They were clearly bothered by what Gus Malzahn had said on the field back in November. They certainly didn't show that before the game. So it's not a surprise that Georgia's not saying anything but Oklahoma is not really saying anything either. However, there's a stark contrast with the fans who will pretty clearly be a lot more open about how the way they really feel. And we talked to John Shin about, is this what the coaches and players actually think, but they're just not saying it. For instance, Oklahoma fans clearly feel that their brand of football is superior. They play faster. They think it's more fun. They think it's more entertaining. And they think because Georgia hasn't seen a lot of this during the regular season, that they could be in for a real shock and a surprise when this game is played on New Year's Day. Georgia fans, conversely, sort of feel the same way about Oklahoma, that Georgia's just more physical, that it's just bigger, it's stronger, and this is the SEC, and the SEC brand of football is more of a fixture in the college football playoff, more of a fixture in the last decade plus of the national championship conversation than what the Big 12 brings to the table. And as we get closer and closer to the game, I start to hear a lot more of that confidence kind of coming out on the part of Georgia fans. I start to hear a lot more of that. Like Mike Mazzell just said in the comments section. I think Georgia's got this. I think Georgia's gonna go out there and win this game. You're starting to hear a lot more of that. A lot of Georgia fans starting to look at these matchups, and they're saying, whether it be the Georgia running game against the Oklahoma defense, whether it be I just mentioned Oklahoma's inability to stop folks in the scoring area. They're starting to see these moments that give Georgia sort of justifiable confidence maybe win this game. You're starting to see a lot more of that. I'm hearing some of that coming in from Georgia fans. We'll continue to take your comments about just that. Aaron Stevens asks a good question. He says, how do the Oklahoma and Auburn offenses compare? I would think fairly similarly. Yeah, I think that there are, at least in some cases, some similarities when it comes to these two offenses. The one thing that I think the Auburn offense is built on historically, a little more than Oklahoma historically has been, it's built on more of those power running concepts. You think about a healthy Kerryon Johnson for Auburn, what he meant to that team this year, and how much of the Gus Malzahn spread has been built around running the football, going back to even during his time as offensive coordinator before he became head coach. This is actually probably one of the misnomers maybe about the Oklahoma offense a little bit this year, and I thought it's been kind of interesting to kind of unfold this over the last few days, is that Oklahoma's offense is actually a little more run-heavy this season than some people may realize. Oklahoma's running the football more than 50% of the time. It's still below the national average in terms of running the football, but it's calling far more running plays than people realize. To me, and listen, I'm not a former coach, so you can take this with a grain of salt. There's a chance it's not even true. It just seems true to me. But the comparison I would make, what the Oklahoma offense feels a little bit like to me is the Lane Kiffin offenses at Alabama. Think about what Kiffin had done there with the Crimson Tide. He had, taken what had always been, great power running, and he sort of added some of that sort of spread passing concepts to that, whether it was, Coker at quarterback or Blake Sims at quarterback or a year's worth of Jalen Hurts. He kind of found a way to sort of mix the spread concepts in with the traditional Alabama running plays. Oklahoma's doing that as well. Now, they've probably kind of gone about it in an opposite direction. They always had the passing, and they've sort of added the power running game into that this year. They've got a terrific offensive line. But the way that Alabama for the last 3 years under Lane Kiffin was this sort of blend of some spread concepts, some power running concepts. It feels like this Oklahoma team may be a better comparison to those Alabama offenses maybe than the Auburn offense, but I think that's an interesting comparison here. Danny Smith says, saw a lot of tickets for the Rose Bowl on Facebook for sale. I'm hoping to get 2 tickets at a good price since prices have dropped. And I do think that's always the biggest issue when you come to a big bowl game like this is that the biggest expense is not going to be the tickets to the game. The biggest expense is going to be the hotel that you stay in because they're going to ask you to stay for several nights. The airfare is the biggest one. I mean, I can tell you from hearing from so many people, the most expensive part of this entire trip for everybody has been how you get here. And so many of you, I've loved hearing all the creative ways in which you've gone about trying to get here to Pasadena or to LA. Some of you have flown to Las Vegas. Some of you are flying to Phoenix. Some of you are flying to San Diego. I've heard from people who are flying to Minneapolis and then taking a plane from Minneapolis to Los Angeles. People are essentially circling the globe to try to find a way to get into an airport close enough to get to Pasadena. So that's the biggest issue, and airfare is obviously sort of jacked up anyway during the holiday time of year. But if you can get to California, getting the ticket to the game is not going to be so bad. Now, there's obviously kind of an extra premium. Like the face value on the tickets is already pretty expensive. I mean, the face value is I think a couple $100. So you've already got a fairly expensive ticket just from that standpoint. But it's not like the thousands of dollars that airfare is going to run you in most cases. So that's actually the ticket may give you a little bit of a break there. Richard Smith said 3 of us are going to drive out there. And listen, y'all think I'm kidding about this. I would love to have driven from Atlanta to Pasadena to LA. I think taking a cross-country trip like that would be a blast. Yesterday I was not traveling the way that the Georgia football team was traveling. We showed you that video a little early in the show of them all sort of kicked back and relaxed, and they had their seats that fully reclined all the way back. They had all the electronics they could possibly want. That's not the way I was traveling. I was sitting in a window seat. When I tell you, I didn't have room to lean back, lean forward. I felt like I was encased in a barrel. That's essentially the way that I felt. The Georgia football team was traveling in style. I'm sort of locked in a cage, and the whole time I'm like watching that flight tracker on the screen in front of me of kind of where we were flying over, and I was thinking the entire time, listen, driving has to be more comfortable than this. Now, it's going to take a lot longer, but it's got to be a lot more comfortable than this. The average person like me, the average Joe, does not get to travel in style the way the Georgia football team did. I'm sort of cramped into a window seat here, looking out the window at the world below me. I think a long cross-country driving trip, I think that would actually be a good bit of fun to do. So I'm actually a little bit jealous of some of y'all that are getting a chance to do that. Ryan Hobbs says he drove from Orlando to Las Vegas. It's beautiful cross-country. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Craig McCrary says he's flying to Las Vegas and renting a car. The rooms and flight much cheaper. Yeah, I think that's a really good point and a really good idea. I guess I did hear a little bit, though, that so many people had flown into Las Vegas for this thing. I mean, Las Vegas is already a pretty popular New Year's Eve destination already, but so many people from like Atlanta and areas like that had been flying into Las Vegas. Those flights actually became a little bit hard to get because once the California flights were sort of dried up, people started moving into the other flights there as well. Keith Finney says he's taking Amtrak. Listen, I think that'd be great. I've never slept on a train. I think that'd be kind of fun. For sure. So we'll keep talking about how everything's going. Brad McGuire says, how much fun is it covering the Dogs? I mean, listen, you can look behind me and see where we are. Los Angeles is beautiful here on this early morning. I keep forgetting what day of the week it is because it was Christmas and we just traveled out here. Today is Wednesday, though, correct? This beautiful Wednesday. Let me get at least the most basic details of our coverage, correct? Yes, it is a beautiful Wednesday. How much fun is it to be a part of this? It is a lot of fun, and that's one of the things that we hope to be able to do here over the course of the next few days is bring all the fun of this to you all to get a chance to whether you're on your way, we'll sort of whet your appetite for what you're going to see when you get here, or for those of you who are going to be watching the game on television, we want to try to give you the experience of what it's going to be like, and so you can feel like you're a part of it. For instance, I know later on today there's a big press conference that we're going to look forward to covering. It's going to be at Disneyland. It's sort of a welcome to the Rose Bowl event for the Oklahoma players and coaches, the Georgia players and coaches. We'll be there to cover that, and we'll be bringing you the sights and sounds of that here on a future episode of DawgNation Daily, and also live today on the DawgNation Facebook page. So yeah, this is a blast to be a part of, and we're very much excited about bringing it all to you. I also want to hear from a few more of you about kind of what your thoughts are about the game. Do you agree with what I sort of feel like that I've seen earlier, that Georgia fans' confidence is kind of growing here? That listen, Dog fans are not hurting for confidence on a typical day anyway, but you sort of get the sense that there's a lot of this sort of growing and expanding right now, that Georgia fans, as they start paying more attention to the game, and I think in some ways fans on this regard are a little bit like the team. We talked last week about how in Georgia's early bowl practices, they weren't focusing on Oklahoma whatsoever. They were having what Kirby Smart talked about as sort of camp-type practices, and Seth Emerson wrote about this at DawgNation.com yesterday, that you really can't focus in on your opponent much more than 6-7 practices anyway without it sort of getting a little stale and getting a little you almost peak too early in that regard. I think the fans can be a little bit like that as well, that, we're only just now getting into the moment where people are truly sort of fixated in on Oklahoma and fixated in on what the Sooners bring to the table. And so you're only now starting to get fans' true opinion of what's going to happen in this game. And I am starting to hear the notion that Georgia fans are pretty confident about this. Ryan Green says, special teams, special teams, special teams. And, we started the show today by talking about the work that Kirby Smart's done as a recruiter, both in terms of the way that he's using the Rose Bowl to recruit future generations of dogs, and kind of how Georgia gets to this point. Andy Staples wrote about that at SI.com, about one of the things that makes Kirby Smart is his commitment to recruiting. And the reason why I bring this up is because, to the commenter who mentioned special teams, I don't think there's any other area on the field that demonstrates Kirby Smart's success in recruiting more so than special teams. That is an area in which Georgia has just gotten deeper. The overall roster's gotten better. The overall roster is more full of sort of 4- and 5-star capable players that now, instead of having like the preferred walk-on, the plucky underdog out there trying to make special teams tackles, you've got guys like Nate McBride who are like legit 4-star guys who, SEC teams are battling over. That's who you've got out there making special teams tackles for you now. And so when you think about Georgia and Oklahoma, I do think it's probably accurate to say that is one spot in which Georgia probably has a slight advantage over the Sooners. Oklahoma's not recruited as well as Georgia has. Oklahoma's not brought in the same number of 4- and 5-star players. Georgia's in the top 10 every single year, number 3 overall last year. Oklahoma not in the top 10 every single year. By a percentage standpoint, nowhere near as high a ratio of 4- and 5-star players. That means that when you trickle down to the special teams ranks, Georgia's just going to have more capable athletes playing there. Andy Staples, wrote about that. He said, in the SEC, the head coach must also be the program's best recruiter. Smart and Pruitt were excellent recruiters at Alabama, but the best on campus was Saban. That's why Alabama's recruiting classes have ranked number 1 in the team rankings of the 24/7 Sports Composite every year since 2011. In that period, Alabama's record of 87-9. Staples goes on to write, there are already signs that Smart could someday be as good as Saban in this respect. Georgia's 2017 class, the first that Smart assembled from start to finish, was number 3, and its 2018 class is in the tops of the national rankings right now. And that success on the recruiting trail, I believe, shows up in the special teams probably as much as anywhere else right now. The Georgia special teams clearly better than they were a couple of years ago, and I think that you can point to recruiting directly on that front to talk about why that is. All right, we're going to take a lot more of your comments here coming up on DawgNation Daily, your chance to kind of share everything going on. I also want to take a moment here to kind of move ahead and look at some of the other things happening around the SEC. This is normally the portion of the show where we kind of do our SEC through. We are a little different format today because of the fact that I'm on the road. So let me look at a couple of these stories from around the SEC, even though the SEC through is going to sound a little bit different. I saw where Aaron Brule, of course, he decommits from Georgia. He'd kind of cited some – this is the safety from Louisiana, of course. Brule had kind of cited some, what he called circumstances beyond his control as to why he was leaving the Georgia program. He had to sort of step away there from that on that front. And there was some thought, well, maybe he's going to go to TCU. That's the school that he had been at. He had taken the official visit. They'd visited in home with him, as I guess the better description of that. TCU had done an in-home visit with him just a few days ago. He decommits from Georgia. But what you see popping up with Aaron Brule on Twitter is now talking about the Tennessee Vols. And maybe this is a case in which, Jeremy Pruitt, and becoming Tennessee coach, has kind of swooped in, and he's gotten the attention of Aaron Brule. And while there may not be room for Brule at Georgia right now, Georgia's obviously recruiting the nation's top class at the moment, but Brule is himself a pretty good player, and it looks like Jeremy Pruitt's going to slip in here and say, hey, maybe this is the kind of guy that we can get involved with our program. And I think it goes to show you here in a couple of fronts that while Brule may not be a perfect fit for Georgia's class right now, Brule is still a pretty good player. And while he may not be playing for Georgia, he may one day be playing against Georgia. And I think that Jeremy Pruitt for Tennessee is the kind of coach that gives that program what it needs. For Tennessee and Florida both, one of the reasons why they'd kind of slipped off the radar here from a national perspective, and one of the reasons why both those programs have sort of lost a step in trying to compete with the premier programs in the SEC like Alabama, I think it can all be traced back to recruiting. Butch Jones had a pretty good class a couple of years ago, but over the last couple of years, the number of 4-star players coming to that program kind of fallen away. And right now, they're just roster spots that need to be filled. So Jeremy Pruitt filling one of those by Aaron Brule, it's probably not a bad decision overall, and probably not a bad idea. And so for Georgia fans who kind of wonder what the future of Aaron Brule would be, maybe not wearing the red and black for Georgia doesn't look like here, but maybe on a field against the Georgia Bulldogs, that may be happening here in the days to come. Of course, Georgia's preparing for its Rose Bowl game against Oklahoma. The other college football playoff game is the Sugar Bowl between Alabama and Clemson. I thought that Tim Beret, the longtime sports information director for Clemson, had a pretty interesting tweet about what could be on the line for Alabama in the game against Clemson. That Dabo Swinney, with a win, has a chance to move into some pretty rarefied air in terms of comparisons to some all-time great Alabama coaches. Here's the tweet from Tim Beret. I'll read it to you. He says, if Clemson beats Alabama, Dabo Swinney will move ahead of Nick Saban in career winning percentage, 77.86 to 77.72. Then, if the Tigers win the national championship, he's also going to move ahead of Bear Bryant, 78.03 to 78.00. So think about this for a moment here. For an Alabama fan who's already a little irritated by the fact that his team lost the national championship game to Clemson last year, and for the last 12 months, that guy's had to hear all the ways in which Clemson's been talked up, all the ways in which Dabo Swinney's been talked up, another sort of level of infamy here, that if Saban were to lose to Swinney on January the 1st, he would also drop down below Dabo Swinney in career winning percentage, and then open the door for Swinney to actually go and win the national championship, and for at least for a brief period of time, have a higher winning percentage than Bear Bryant. And there's also a caveat to that in that that's much fewer games for Dabo Swinney than Bear Bryant. I guess even Nick Saban as well. But it is kind of interesting that Clemson here, the national stature has grown. A lot of that's based on its victory against Alabama last year. Another victory over the Crimson Tide. And this year's Sugar Bowl would only cause that to grow even more and cause a lot of other people to start to wonder where Alabama sort of ranks in its national pecking order. Right now it's got a lower-rated recruiting class than Georgia does. It could lose to Clemson on the field again, and that certainly be way too soon to have any level of panic about the situation in Alabama. But Alabama fans are used to seeing their team on top, both on the field and in recruiting, and this could be the kind of January where that's not necessarily the case anymore. A couple other SEC stories I want to get to here for a moment. Andy Staples, in writing about what's going on, with the former Saban assistants and their ability to kind of live out what Nick Saban's done in Alabama and how Kirby Smart's done a better job of instilling that Alabama process at Georgia than guys like Jim McElwain and maybe Jimbo Fisher and Will Muschamp, other Saban assistants have done. One of the things that he pointed out that is going to get some attention here, I think, over the next couple of days is just how bad things got for Jim McElwain at Florida. One of the things when Dan Mullen took that job there with the Gators, one of the things that he talked about was the need to improve the strength and conditioning program for Alabama. Or I should say for Florida, improve that strength and conditioning program for the Gators. It was obviously a reference to what people had sort of thought was maybe a deficient strength and conditioning program going back to the Jim McElwain years there at Florida. We find out now maybe just how true that was, in that some Florida players were paying a personal coach. They were actually leaving the Florida campus to go get some weight training and some physical conditioning work from a private trainer, not even associated with the Florida program, on their own dime, basically paying for it themselves, because apparently they didn't feel like they were getting that level of treatment that they needed from the Florida Gators. Another sign that things were just not quite right with Jim McElwain at Florida. We kind of noticed that here on DawgNation Daily. We sort of saw that program kind of slipping under him a little bit. We're finding out now just how true that really was, and Florida obviously going a different direction now with Dan Mullen. We'll make that your SEC through. I will also remind you that our trip here to Los Angeles and DawgNation Daily brought to you in part by our friends at Kroger. Don't forget that Kroger's got a great event going on right now. It's the Holiday Seafood Roadshow. It's going on all the way continuing right now all the way through January the 2nd. They've got some great deals for you. When you use the Kroger card, you can get buy one, get one free lobster tail, Alaskan king crab legs, $24.99 a pound. Also, when you use the card, Colossal Cook Shrimp, $12.99 a pound. Jumbo Gulf Shrimp, $9.99 a pound. Key West Pink Shrimp, $9.99 a pound. Colossal Shrimp, $9.99 a pound. Extra Large Shrimp, $7.99 a pound. A lot of y'all getting ready for some big-time New Year's Eve parties, things like that. Listen, some great seafood is a great way to do that. The Holiday Road Show at your local Kroger, a good opportunity to get a great deal on some of that seafood to make your holiday season go really well. And, of course, it's great to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily. I want to get some more of your comments here coming up in just a moment. Before we kind of dive into that, I also want to talk about something that Ivan Maisel had written about at ESPN.com. And, you know, I think this is kind of a timely headline in that a lot of Georgia fans are sort of thinking similar thoughts about this right now as Georgia kind of moves into an area in which we just really haven't seen the Dogs in a long time. And for people who are my age, I'm 40, on a national stage like this with a chance to win a national championship, this is the kind of thing, with all due respect to 2012, but, for most of us, you really think back to like the early 80s, the Herschel Walker era, as the last time, Georgia had the level of national relevance as it seems to have right now. And Ivan Maisel, the writer for ESPN.com, has, I guess you'd call this a bit of a warning for Georgia fans. He says, enjoy this game, Georgia fans. This is as good as it gets. And Maisel had sort of talked to Kirby Smart about this during one of Smart's media availabilities. And the overall gist of what Maisel is saying here is that when something is new, it's just more fun. When something... when you're in the early stages of something, there's something about that feels more special than it does for, like, say, Alabama fans who've been in a spot like this year after year after year. And what Maisel essentially says to Georgia fans here is, hey, make sure you enjoy this because there's no guarantee that Georgia's going to be back here again in the future. But when it does come back, it's not going to quite feel as special then as it does now. And I think that is probably true in most sports. Most dynasties that create great success, I am sure there is a degree to which it does sort of grow stale over time. If you're a New England Patriots fan, for instance, I'm sure, continual trips to the Super Bowl, continual times of seeing your team hold up that Lombardi trophy, I'm sure after a while they just sort of all run together. I imagine for, New York Yankees fans in the 90s, there may have been a degree to which that was true as well. Yankees going a long string of World Series wins, and there was... it became old hat after a while, right? I mean, I'm sure that's the way that kind of went. But in college football, and the SEC in particular, I think that Georgia fans are probably a little less likely to fall prey to this kind of stuff than maybe other sports fans are in other places. And it could be that I'm wrong about that. It could be that's not as true as I think it is. But there is... in the SEC, I think this desire to not only be the best, but then defend that title once you have it, to maintain that level of dominance. We talked about this with Alabama a moment ago. Alabama's been on top both in terms of recruiting and, on the field for years and years and years under Nick Saban, but there is no desire among Alabama fans to see that relinquished whatsoever. And if Georgia can somehow be successful enough to make trips like this feel commonplace, I think that Georgia fans are a little less likely to grow tired of this than other sports fans are. I understand where Ivan Maisel's kind of coming here on his comments here, but I think in the SEC, and I think with Georgia fans in particular, that's probably a little bit less likely to become true. Let's get ready to close out our podcast here today. And as we do just that, I will remind you that here on DawgNation Daily, even though we are obviously in L.A. and we're thinking about the college football playoff and thinking about the Rose Bowl, we are also still thinking about the Gator Hater Countdown because, listen, no matter how good Georgia gets and how many national championships Georgia wins, we still believe that a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. Of course, we'll continue to do the Gator Hater Countdown each and every day here on DawgNation Daily, including 304 days from right now. Georgia heads back to Jacksonville, maybe as the defending national champions, maybe with great memories of having won the Rose Bowl one way or another. Georgia heads there 304 days from now, and we'll remind you each and every day that a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost, and Gators fans jealous of the Dogs here in California getting ready for the Rose Bowl, and that's exactly the way we like it. We've got a lot more fun coming for you here on DawgNation Daily over the course of the next few days, live here from L.A. We're glad to have you a part of it, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day, everybody. And for those of you watching us on video, obviously we'll hang around with you for a little longer here, take a few more of your comments as we kind of roll through a lot of what's going to be going on here this week and throughout the next few days. A lot of fun and surprises in store, and we're certainly glad to be able to bring all of that here to you, including a lot of your comments right now. Danny Smith says he's a Gator hater always. Danny, appreciate that. Thanks for weighing in on that. Chris Davis says, what do the players have planned for the rest of the week? Well, Chris, the big thing here today is a trip to Disneyland for the Georgia players here at, I guess it's 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Am I right about those times? 5 Eastern, there'll be a press conference with Georgia players and coaches, Oklahoma players and coaches there from Disneyland. I'm sure there's also a day of, Kirby Smart said they're not coming to ride rides. I think there will be a little bit of rides being enjoyed there at Disneyland, at least today for a couple of minutes. So that's what they're getting ready to do and enjoy. A lot of comments coming in here. Hal Love says, welcome back, BA. Hope you had a great Christmas. Hal, I really did. I appreciate that. Earl Klein says, Colin Cowherd says that Georgia's got no chance against the Oklahoma Sooners. Listen, this has been a Colin Cowherd thing now for a while. He was anti-Alabama, really paid no attention whatsoever to Georgia. So obviously he sort of backed himself into a corner on this. And I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that opinion, just given the fact that this is kind of the corner that he's backed himself into based on some of the things that he's talked about all season long. Ryan Green says Cameron Nizelek's going to be big. Oklahoma's going to get yards. We got to make them work for it. That is a great point, Ryan. The longer you can make the field for the Oklahoma offense, the better you have a chance of emerging victorious in this game. I said it a moment ago. Let me pull the number back up here. For trips inside the 40, Oklahoma, once it gets inside the 40, is averaging 5.2 points once it gets inside the 40. That's those drives that get into the opponent's 40. Once they get there, they're averaging 5.2 points. That puts them in the top 10 in the country in that regard. So obviously, if they get a drive going, they're going to find a way to get points out of it. But the longer you can make the field for them, the better the overall opportunity becomes. I think that's a really good point. A lot of y'all upset with what Colin Cowherd said about Georgia. I certainly get that. Dedrick Frazier says if Oklahoma can't tackle our running backs, it's going to be a long day. And Dedrick, I would zero in on one thing in particular, and I know you know this, and I'm sure you're going to agree with this. I would zero in on the idea of just how important first down is going to be. I mean, to me, first down tells the entire story of how this game is going to unfold for Georgia. Because if Georgia can find a way to get those 4 yards on first down and put itself on schedule for the rest of the drive, all of a sudden you're not asking Georgia to be in those third and long situations where Oklahoma can sort of pin its ears back and do a little bit of what Auburn may have done to Georgia in that November game. Georgia's obviously going to keep the Oklahoma offense off the field, and the best way to do that is to pick up big yards on first down. I think that's a really good point. Jerry Lewis says he agrees that Georgia's not going to get tired or bored or whatever with UGA winning. Yeah, listen, Georgia fans are not going to grow complacent for a long time, I don't think. Joe Rush asked an interesting question. Isaac Taylor Stewart lives not too far south of where we are right now, the elite cornerback for the class of 2018. Any chance he makes his way to see the Dogs this week? I hadn't thought about that. That's a pretty good question, Joe. Van West says, I'd love to see Georgia get good enough that we could get sick of winning. That's a good point as well. Michael Morrow says, great to have the podcast back today. Michael, I appreciate that. It's great to be with you here live in California here as well. Santiago Diarn says, what are my plans during the free time? DawgNation wants to know. I don't really quite know how much free time we're going to have here. So we're going to finish this here, and it's actually still going to be very early in LA, as you realize. It's going to be 8 Pacific when we're done. But we're going to shoot some other videos, some surprises later on today. We will be going over to Disneyland for the event this afternoon. So not going to be as much free time, but I'm excited about just being here and covering it all. I'm thrilled about all of that. Yeah, really excited about that. Let me scroll up here and get some more of the more recent comments. R. Lee Garnell asked a good question. R. Lee says, will Oklahoma's vertical attack hurt us the way that Missouri's did earlier? I mean, I will admit that I think that Georgia's secondary is a potential vulnerability for this game against Oklahoma. There's no denying that's true. And Missouri was able to exploit it, and Oklahoma could very much do the same kind of thing. But what's important to remember here is that Missouri, and really the following week against South Carolina was kind of the same way. South Carolina threw the ball against Georgia as well. Now, Missouri threw it, those deep routes to wide receivers. South Carolina threw the ball to Hayden Hurst a million times. I swear, that day against South Carolina, Hayden Hurst looked like he was 8.5 feet tall, just pulling everything down out of the sky. Both those teams were throwing the ball against Georgia and having some success doing it. The overall yards probably were more impressive for Missouri than South Carolina, but both teams, my memory would suggest, were kind of moving the ball through the air. But what neither team, South Carolina nor Missouri, did to Georgia, I think this is an important potential blueprint for the Rose Bowl. Neither one of those teams ran the football at all. I mean, what did Missouri have, like 50 yards the entire day? South Carolina had fewer than 100, like 70 for the day. Like 24 yards rushing in the first half for like both those teams. I mean, neither team ran the ball at all. And that's an important thing to remember for Oklahoma. Now, the Oklahoma running game, the offensive line is much better. The running backs are much better. The Oklahoma running game is much, much better than either of those two teams I just compared. So don't hear what I'm not saying. But if Georgia can stop the Oklahoma run, then I don't think you have to be that worried about Mayfield and the Oklahoma passing game getting its yards and points. Because, listen, these spread offenses are designed to compile yards, compile points. And you can't get too nervous if something like that's happening. But you got to look at the rushing yards because it is ball game over, good luck in 2018 if Oklahoma adds the running game to the passing game. And that's what Georgia's designed to stop. It is designed to stop that rushing attack. So it's that number that's more important to me than anything that Mayfield does through the air. If Oklahoma's a one-dimensional team, Georgia's going to be fine. Because think about this yourself as a fan of Georgia. How'd you like to feel like the only thing that you could do was pass, and you had to throw the ball on every down? Would you feel good about your team's chance of winning if that was the case? I think you probably would not. I think the same thing's probably true for Oklahoma here as well. It knows it's got to be multidimensional if it wants to win, and it knows it's going to be a difficult thing to do against Georgia. Robert Dibble's got a great point. He says, we talked earlier about Ivan Mazel's piece about Georgia fans getting tired of winning. What Robert says is, I was tired of the Belt Bowl and the Tax Slayer Bowl. Yeah, that's a really good point. I got tired of playing Nebraska every year. Playing Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl, that's not the kind of thing you're going to get tired of very easily. That's a really good point. Preston Bice says, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, Preston says, we're talking about Oklahoma stats against the defense they face or lack thereof in the Big 12. We are dominant. That's an example of some of that confidence that I thought I was starting to hear from some Georgia fans. You're getting some of that. I would be careful, though. I think the efficiency numbers, and I want to go back and kind of harp on this. And I'm not a math guy. I'm not. Y'all know. If you watch or listen every day, you know I'm not that smart. But I do think judging Oklahoma in terms of how successful its plays are in terms of a percentage of the necessary yards it needs. I think judging it that way is probably a little bit better than just looking at the overall, yards it's given up or the yards it's compiled. I mean, the Big 12 and the SEC are so different that it's really hard to do an apples-to-apples comparison when it comes there. And I know that there's one way of looking at that makes the Oklahoma defense not look very good. I really do think that can be a bit misleading, but I understand where you're coming from. Anthony Profit checking in from Fort Myers. Anthony, really appreciate that. Bill Kibbe says UGA winning is going to be a combination of getting that 4 yards and first down. We talked about that. But also controlling the clock and keeping Baker Mayfield off the field. And, Bill, I think you're right. And, Bill, I would go so far as to say that 4 yards and first down, that magic number, that 4 yards, 2nd and 6. 2nd and 6 is magic, is music to the ears of Georgia fans on January the 1st because 2nd and 6 means that Baker Mayfield stays right where he is on the bench. 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8, that all of a sudden at that point in time, Mayfield getting that helmet back on, that chin strap snapped back up again, that becomes a little bit more likely, absolutely. Aaron Stevens talking about the ways in which Georgia had success, or I should say Missouri had success against Georgia. Yeah, listen, there's a big reason why Georgia is spending so much time chasing down. Somebody mentioned Isaac Taylor Stewart a little earlier. There's a big reason why Georgia's spending so much time chasing that guy down. Why you're going to hear the name Tyson Campbell 9 million times between now and February. Georgia knows it needs to upgrade its secondary. I mean, there's no sugarcoating that, no denying that. Georgia needs to bring in more elite players into the secondary. For now, you got the roster you got, and you got the group that you got. And I do think, you want to go back to Simply Smarter Game Planning brought to you by Aldi. The simple, smart game plan for Georgia is to find a way to minimize the impact of the secondary on this game. What can you do that makes them less of a factor? Which, by the way, becomes a great sort of chess piece type choice here. Do you blitz Mayfield, which opens up wider passing lanes to throw into, or do you take guys like Lorenzo Carter with that big wide wingspan, drop him back in coverage a little bit more, and all of a sudden Mayfield's got more time to throw, but he's got less spots to throw? I mean, I think that right there is the very interesting sort of chess match from the Georgia side of things here. You can blitz Mayfield, but if Oklahoma blocks it, he's going to have a field day. Or you can give him time to throw, and he's good enough to pick you apart if you do. But all of a sudden you've got a little bit more back seven protection back there to give him lanes to throw into. I think that's a really interesting choice. Alan Verbanchik asked about the Only East T-shirts. So I'm actually feeling pretty good about this, Alan. I feel like we reached out to just about everybody that won, and if you didn't win, if you didn't hear from our folks last week, because I know they reached out to a lot of our winners, I think they made contact with everybody but a couple of people. So if you won an Only East T-shirt and didn't hear from us on that, hit me up directly, and we'll make sure we get you taken care of on that. Galen Jacobs says, when are we getting your game prediction, B.A.? So I think that, I guess I mirror Georgia fans here. The closer we get to the game, the more likely I feel that Georgia wins. And the more I feel like honestly, we talked about this on a show a few weeks ago. I feel like the winner scores 30, the loser doesn't. That's what I feel like happens. So, I think it takes 30 to win, but I don't think there's one of those games that's going to be played in the 65, 70 total points. I think this is somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 35-28 type deal. 31-24 maybe. I think the winner of this game's got to find a way to get to 30. But I think the defense that can find a way to keep the other team below that threshold is probably what wins. So, maybe I'll get more specific with my score a little later on, but I'm thinking something in the neighborhood of 35-28, 31-27. I guess that put us below the over-under total. Is that right? Some of y'all know that a lot better than I do, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Bubby Dean says Fromm's going to have some big plays, and yeah, I think that listen. Georgia may very well lose this game, but I'll say it over and over again. I don't believe that if Georgia loses, Jake Fromm's going to be the reason why. I don't have the slightest concern about Fromm in this game. I don't have the slightest concern whatsoever. I think he's going to be just fine. Nager Yang says Dogs on top in L.A. Yeah, boy, it'd be a great feeling. Joel Moody says he's predicting Richard LeCount gets more playing time when Georgia gets ahead, causing Mayfield to throw more and having to scramble. That's an interesting thought there. Miriam Martin Corbin says, I hope Jim Chaney opens up the playbook a little. Nice to see a few plays we haven't seen before, just enough to keep them off balance. Yeah, Miriam, what I hope is the game plan that we saw in the Auburn game, and I know it's different teams, so you're going to have a slightly different approach to different opponents, but that Auburn game was this diverse array of throws to running backs, tight end catches a touchdown, multiple receivers catching the ball. Whatever that game plan was, that's almost like Jim Chaney answering every one of his critics for everything he's been criticized for on the same day, basically. So whatever Georgia did in the SEC championship, speaking from the perspective of a fan, I'd love to see Georgia do more of that in the Rose Bowl for sure. All right, we got to get ready to get out of here in a moment. Let me get ready to take a couple more comments, and we'll get ready to wrap up the show. And by the way, L.A. is looking pretty today. Good to be here. Stephanie Carrillo says, watching those boys on the plane was so awesome. They were soaking it all in. That said, shout out to Delta for hooking them up. I'm not too much worried about the game. We want it really bad, and we want some respect, so I believe our guys are not going to let the Sooners get anywhere. Yeah, it was cool. You go to the DawgNation Facebook page. Seth Emerson had some great video of the team getting off the buses yesterday. We showed you Georgia's video of it getting on the plane. They are having the time of their lives, and they deserve that. I am thrilled on that regard. One more piece of business. Alan Verbanchik says, how did they reach out about the On the East T-shirts? They reached out on Twitter about those. So, Alan, hit me on Twitter at DawgNation Daily, and we'll see if we can get you taken care of on that. As a reminder. Holly Hightower says, Kirby said a long time to develop a game plan. That's dangerous. Yeah, listen, I trust Kirby Smart and these Georgia coaches getting ready to do all of that for sure. Absolutely. I trust them with this time to prepare. All right, we're getting ready to get wrapped up here for today. All right, we'll be back, though, throughout the day. We've got some stuff going on. We'll be with you from Disneyland a little later on today. We'll bring you the sights and sounds of all of that. There will be SEC Country Live today. I will not be hosting it. I will make a special appearance by phone for that here today, though. So we'll talk some more Rose Bowl with you there. You can reach out to me at DawgNation Daily if you want some more information about the Rose Bowl. We'll try to chat about that on there. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time again for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live. Y'all have a great day. We'll look forward to talking to you then.